Sonic fanbase has a tendency to constantly change their mind on what Sonic games are considered good. For a Sonic game to receive critical success upon its release simply isn't enough anymore. Who knows what the Sonic fandom will mark the game as years later. I spoke about this in my Sonic Unleashed video, as that game has fluctuated so much on being good or bad. At this point it's impossible as a newcomer to know the game's quality. Other examples would be Sonic 1 and Sonic CD. Both games received critical acclaim upon their release and were seen as top tier Sonic games for years, but recently people seem to think both games are pure dog shit, especially CD, and of course the Sonic Adventure, which went from one of the best 3D platformers ever made to a janky, unpolished, broken and poorly designed mess. However, one game that has become the subject of this whole change in perception thing that Sonic fanbase loves to do is Sonic Colors, and honestly it surprises me. Sonic Colors released in 2010 and received critical acclaim, with critics at the time giving it very high scores and saying it was finally a return to form for Sonic after years of mediocre titles. Sonic fans too at the time seemed happy, since a lot were a fan of the day stages in Sonic Unleashed, and this game is essentially that. The game sold well and resulted in Sonic Generations again using the boost formula and further refining it, and in 2017 Sonic Forces was released on next generation consoles with the boost formula, and we don't talk about that. I remember playing Sonic Colors when it was new in 2010 and being a big fan of the game, but then something strange happened for me and many others. Somewhere between 2010 and now, my opinion of the game soured. I do remember playing the game through again in around 2015 or 16 and remember thinking the game was still pretty good, and then after that my opinion of the game just sank, and I honestly can't tell you why. I never touched the game again, and yet my opinion turned from Colors being one of the best modern Sonic games to it being a game with a crappy story, cutscenes so cringy you just want to skip them, awful controls, gimmicky implementation of the wisps, and that the game was just 90% filler with basic 2D stages. And that last point I really do hear everywhere in the Sonic community. People seem to remember this game as just hundreds of 2D levels with basic platforming and boring level design. And all of these people who think that, I don't blame you at all, because up until me replaying Sonic Colors for this video, I completely agreed. In fact, when coming up with the idea for this video, I anticipated it to be much different, and I plan to be very critical on the game. But upon playing Sonic Colors again for this review, my opinion has completely changed. So I'm here to defend Sonic Colors, which sounds stupid because Colors is one of the most highly reviewed 3D Sonic games released, but if you're a Sonic fan, you know what I'm talking about. In recent years, a large stigma around this game has grown. One thing I noticed was a majority of the people who were not a fan of Colors hadn't actually played the game in a while. So in this video I'm going to try and tell you why Sonic Colors isn't that overly simplistic Sonic game people will try and tell you it is, and why you should go back and play that game now with a new perspective. Hopefully you'll see what I saw.
Plot or not, you can't be mad at this view. This place is taking beauty to the next level.
Okay, so I think it's fair to start off with the story, which is a common point of criticism for this game. The Sonic Colors story is pretty lighthearted and not very deep, but it is definitely overplayed just how simplistic the story is. The premise essentially is that Dr. Eggman has created an amusement park in space that links 5 planets together, if you want to call Starlight Carnival a planet. The planets are all linked together by the sole attraction, Tropical Resort, which has a huge elevator shooting down to Earth. The idea is that Eggman has reformed, and instead of trying to take over the world, he is simply opening an interstellar amusement park, allowing customers to travel between the planets locked in orbit. We soon find out that Eggman has another motive. He is actually slowly capturing aliens from one of the planets he has locked in orbit, Planet Wisp. He wants to harness the aliens' energy for a huge mind control laser that he will use on Earth to conquer it. Sonic heads to the amusement park with Tails, as he doesn't trust the idea of Eggman being a reformed character, and discovers an alien from the Wisp race. After Tails creates a translator, the alien, named Yaka, tells Sonic that his race are being captured by Eggman. He's harnessing their power and that he has locked their planet along with the other 4 to his amusement park against their will to trap them and capture all the aliens. From this, Sonic goes around each planet freeing aliens and shutting down generators that are keeping the planets locked together. Now this plot is definitely not as intricate as Sonic Unleashed or any of the adventure games, but the premise isn't shit. The story is creative and still motivates the player to saving the aliens. I will never understand why Sonic Colors story exclusively gets put under such a large microscope. The premise is exciting and doesn't feel out of place for a Sonic plot. I never ever hear people criticise the plot of Sonic Heroes, and that plot is by far more simplistic than Colors. However, the overall plot isn't really the main thing people go for when attacking Colors. Colors. That by far has to go to the character interactions and the cutscenes. Now it is true that the new writers that were brought on with Sonic Colors had never played a Sonic game before and were used to writing much more simplistic plots, since they wrote for things like Happy Tree Friends. And let me tell you now, I do not like these writers. I feel that they have butchered and oversimplified the Sonic franchise to the point where in terms of plot, it is a shell of its former self. But I will say that I think of all the games they wrote for so far, Sonic Colors is by far the least offensive and their best work. The first thing to establish is that Sonic Colors is the first game where Jason Griffith was replaced by Roger Craig Smith. Rest in peace, Jason. And it is well known at this point that people are not the biggest fan of Roger Craig Smith, and I do have to agree. You know my homeboy will always be JG, but Roger definitely isn't awful, and over time he has grown on me. While his voice is definitely a different take on Sonic, the way he delivers his lines is well done, and for me it's not really that much of a stretch for Sonic to sound like that. I think that Roger gets so much hate because he has never had a chance to prove himself. He's never starred in a game like Sonic Unleashed, where he has had his chance to really put emotion into his role. Nevertheless, the fact that Colors is Roger's debut game is definitely a factor to why people from the offset are not a fan of this game's character interactions and plot overall. I think it's unfair to do this. If we take away the stigma because it's Roger Craig Smith, I do think you'll see that the cutscenes are not bad. I really do think if the voice actor was still Jason Griffith, then the character interactions would get nowhere near as much hate. People love to say that the Sonic Colors cutscenes are just complete cringe and hard to watch, and while there are some moments where the game does make me wince a bit, they're few and far between. When watching the cutscenes, I couldn't help see how Sonic and Tails were interacting with each other like they were good friends, making jokes and having friendly jabs at each other. Their relationships seem believable and really genuine. The way Sonic acts is something people love to use as a point, since he's constantly talking in the cutscenes and making jokes, but honestly, that has always been the type of character Sonic is. He's always been cocky and in your face with attitude, so the idea of him not taking any of his enemies seriously or appearing quite self-absorbed just seems to me like a continuation of how Sonic is. One thing people love to use as an argument towards the game's cutscenes is that Sonic breaks the fourth wall and talks to the camera once.
No, wisps with a W.
Yeah, I'll just stick with aliens if that's okay with everybody.
Hell, I even made that point in my Sonic Decade review, but when looking at it with a full perspective, there's not much weight to this argument. I mean, in Sonic Unleashed, Chip does the exact same thing at one point. Sonic doing this really doesn't offend me like it does to many others, and to me, it just highlights Sonic's personality. Some of the jokes in the cutscenes aren't great, and it's clear that they're for a younger audience, but I've got to say that every character in Colors is represented well, unlike some future games. Eggman is great as ever, and Orbot and Cubot are pretty good as well. While not all jokes land, they're definitely not these awful things that ruin the game's story and make it hard to watch like someone make you believe. And honestly, there are times in this game where I do find some of the stuff the characters say pretty amusing, especially Eggman.
Precious little aliens! I'll harness their hyper-go-on power and then nothing will stop me. I know I say that every time, but this time really, nothing will stop me.
Experience has also taught me that the best way to solve problems is to kick robot butt.
Visitors are cautioned to avoid eating, petting, or saving any aliens.
Y'all reckon you'll be able to get yourself enough of that energy to take over the whole dang planet?
Yes, I reckon I will. Where is your new voice chip?
It's more than a theme, it's a reality. He's using them like some kind of living intergalactic gasoline.
That's pretty low, even for a sleazeball like Eggman.
Some displacement of indigenous aliens and destruction of natural resources may occur. Eggman Enterprises not responsible.
Please remember, all planets in Eggman's incredible interstellar amusement park are, as far as you know, wholly owned properties of Eggman Enterprises and its subsidiaries. All unauthorized photography, video reproduction, or shutting down of generators is strictly prohibited. Thank you!
Eggman, I am going to save this planet, and I am going to free these aliens! No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
Fine. You're so smart, robot, you take care of this mess. Release the big boy! At least I know he won't screw it up. Hasta la bye-bye, suckers!
Overall, I think that Sonic Colors benefits from having only a few characters present, since it hides the writer's lack of knowledge for the Sonic cast, and allows them to focus on the few main ones, and in my opinion, nail their personalities pretty well. Do not mistake this section of the video as a defense towards the new Sonic writers that Colors introduced. Those guys are fucking awful and seriously need to go. What I am saying is that Sonic Colors is the first game they wrote for, and doesn't try to go for any heavy theming or plot lines, so the Colors story comes out pretty unscathed, and for the type of game Sonic Colors is, I do think it works very well. The progression for Sonic Colors is much more streamlined compared to previous titles. Instead of following games like Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic 06, and the previous game released at that point, Sonic Unleashed, where there were hub worlds to explore and often tasks to complete to get access to levels, like Sun and Moon medals in Unleashed, finding a key in Sonic Adventure, or testing out a man's fucking shoes in Sonic 06. Sonic Colors follows more in the footsteps of Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, and the classic Sonic games, where you simply complete a level and move on to the next one. Now, whether or not hub worlds belong in a Sonic game is definitely not a black and white answer within the Sonic community, so I see some people hate the progression system in Colors and some people love it, but I think this type of progression suits the type of game Sonic Colors is. I do like hub worlds in Sonic games when they are done right, but I don't think every single Sonic game has to have one shoehorned in. Colors is a light-hearted game that puts an emphasis on fun gameplay above everything else, so I think this type of progression is a good fit for the game. In a game like Sonic Forces with a much bigger emphasis on story and characters, then I can see complaints, since being able to have like a hub in the Resistance HQ or something would have been immersive and given us a chance to talk to characters and actually see their opinions on the situation that's happening. The simple level to level progression in Forces hurts the game because it oversimplifies the plot and makes the whole task of taking back the whole world feel so easy and unthreatening. A game like Unleashed that had a similar plot in that you had to fix the planet definitely benefited from having hub worlds in my opinion, since you got to see the different characters in the game and it felt like you were discovering new locations and fixing things naturally. But Colors is different. The plot of the game takes a backseat here, and that's okay. You have to remember, at the time of Colors' release in 2010, people were desperate for a Sonic game that fully committed to the Sonic Unleashed boost gameplay. Along with this, people were tired of Sonic constantly having some sort of gimmick to sell his games, so Sonic Team wanted to really focus on fleshing out the boost gameplay and refining it as best as possible. On top of this, Sega at the time of Sonic Colors' release were trying to increase the brand value of Sonic and gain new fans of the franchise. They started delisting Sonic games from their website that had unfavourable Metacritic scores, and they were also trying to make Sonic Colors a hit for Mario fans, which is evident by the fact that the Sonic Colors level select screen is pretty much ripped out of New Super Mario Bros. But overall, no, I do not think that Sonic Colors' omission of hub worlds is a negative on the game. In fact, I think it was the right decision for the kind of game Sonic Colors is, and in my opinion, it keeps the pacing of the game just right. Now, the actual controls of Sonic Colors are very good, and people seem to think that at the time of its release, but as the game has got older, this stigma around the way Sonic controls has developed, where people have this idea that Colors just strips back the boost gameplay and oversimplifies Sonic's controls to accommodate for the Wii, and I too shared this opinion, but then I went back and played it. Now, the first thing to establish about Sonic Colors is that it can be played in a variety of ways. You can play the game with a Wii Remote and Nunchuck, a GameCube controller, a classic controller, and a Wii Remote. Yes, a standalone Wii Remote. And this is where the issue lies, because people are out here saying Colors controls like dog shit when they played the game on a fucking Wii Remote. If you ask me, the game needs to at least be played on a Wii Remote and Nunchuck. A Wii Remote is just too uncomfortable and finicky, at least for me. The first time I ever played Colors, I played it with a Wii Remote and Nunchuck. Then on my second playthrough, I used the GameCube controller. And then most recently, I played the game through on a Wii U in HD with a Wii Classic Controller Pro. If you really want to get the best gameplay out of Colors, you want to be playing the game with either a GameCube controller or the Wii Classic Pro controller. Sonic Team had quite a task when creating Sonic Colors, since he had just created the Hedgehog engine for Sonic Unleashed, which was an amazing engine that allowed the boost gameplay to work so perfectly and have levels look so alive and lush. But Sonic Colors was being released exclusively on the Wii. The Hedgehog engine was designed for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and therefore could not be used with Sonic Colors. Sonic Team instead went with creating the game on the Fizz X engine, which was previously used for Sonic and the Secret Rings, and I have to commemorate Sonic Team for the excellent job they did on porting the boost formula over to the Wii. I had this idea in my head that Sonic Colors boost gameplay was super watered down and extremely limited, but upon playing the game again for this video, that is not the case at all. All of Sonic's skills have been carried over from Sonic Unleashed, with the exception of the Lightspeed Dash, which was instead utilised in the Hover Wisp power-up. Aside from that, Sonic has all the skills you remember from Sonic Unleashed, and they've actually improved and added a couple of things. They added a double jump for Sonic, basically allowed him to swim, kind of, and they changed how Sonic feels to move. Instead of Sonic Unleashed slow and unresponsive standalone movements, the way Sonic controls in Colors is very snappy and responsive. It is hard to describe how he feels without you playing for yourself, but it is very different than Sonic Unleashed, and overall Sonic feels much more light in Colors, at least in the 3D sections. This is due to the fact that Sonic has to be able to be playable with a single Wii remote, something that only has a D-pad. This does mean, yes, Sonic does not have full analog control, but the way Sonic Team have implemented the control is done very well, and despite not having full analog control, Sonic still feels great to move, and in my opinion, his responsiveness and acceleration has been improved from Unleashed. Obviously, I would have preferred if he did have full analog control, but his movement worked exceptionally well for something locked to the limitations of the D-pad. I do think that the analog stick of the Nunchuk, GameCube and Classic controller do help mask the lack of the analog control, with the jagged edges around the stick, making it feel like a much more segmented analog experience. However, I can't deny that the controls of Sonic Colors are held back by the limited buttons available on the Wii remote. I really do think that making the decision to have the game playable with a standalone Wiimote wasn't needed and just an unnecessary addition to make the game even more accessible. Sonic Unleashed on the Wii, played with the Wii remote and Nunchuk, while in my opinion much better played with a GameCube or Classic controller, still managed to keep all of Sonic's movesets for that game available to the player at all time, by making smart decisions like having Sonic also run forward when the quick step button was pressed down, so the analog stick could be used freely to sidestep. Sonic Colors however couldn't do this because they also wanted the game playable on a standalone Wii remote. Because of this, they went for a different approach.
It means context sensitive. It's sensitive to context.
Sonic's full moveset is all here, but it isn't all available to you at once. On your own, you have the boost, slide, jump, homing attack and stomp, all the basic stuff, but anything like drifting or quick stepping can only be done when the game allows you to. When you're at a section of the level that wants you to drift or quick step, the controls change so you can perform the move. That does sound confusing, but it really is very simple and I never struggled with it. Overall, I do think that this is the one thing that holds back Sonic Colors controls and stops the game from being considered as a contender for best boost gameplay. And I do think that it would have worked much better if they just dropped support for the standalone Wii remote and copied Sonic Unleashed on the Wii, but it still works competently. The main annoying thing is that while the context sensitive drift and quick step makes sense for the Wii remote and maybe even the Wii remote and Nunchuk, even if you use a GameCube or Classic controller that has more than enough buttons to have all of Sonic's moveset available, you're still restricted and can only perform the drift or quick step when the game wants you to and changes your controls to suit it. This did used to really bother me, and before playing this game again for the video, I thought it ruined the game, but upon playing it again, it really doesn't bother me as much. Yes, it would have been better to have access to all of Sonic's moveset, but it really doesn't ruin the experience and you get used to it very quickly. I think this issue is minimized because the quick step controls work very well since Sonic auto runs forward and you still have the option to boost, and the actual drifting in this game works so much better than it does in Sonic Unleashed. You have much more controls in your drifts. So yes, while the drift and quick step do stop Sonic Colors controls from being truly exceptional, do not let that put you off how Sonic feels to play, because overall he still feels very good, and the drift and quick step are very minor quirks that you do get used to very quickly. For me, by the second planet, the controls felt completely natural. Now it's time to talk about Sonic Colors level design, and this is the one that people seem to have an issue with the most. The general consensus seems to be that for each of the areas in Sonic Colors, the first act or two is fun and well designed, and then any acts after that are just crappy 2D filler. And again, I had this same opinion when going into Sonic Colors most recently, but upon playing it, it just wasn't true. There are 6 main areas to explore in Sonic Colors, each with 6 acts and a boss fight. Now one thing I will give you is the boss fights. They are pretty pathetic in this game. While there are 6 areas, this, there are essentially only 3 boss fights, since the
Big boy
from Tropical Resort is reused in Planet Wisp, the pirate ship boss from Sweet Mountain is reused in Aquarium Park, and the spaceship boss from Starlight Carnival is reused again in Asteroid Coaster. The
Big boy
boss is pathetic on both occasions. The boss can be beaten under a minute and it is super simple. The pirate ship boss is a bit better, with it having 2 sections, one where you actually board the ship, which is admittedly pretty cool, but the bosses are still pathetically easy. And then lastly there's the spaceship one, which in my opinion is the only half decent boss in the game, excluding the final boss. This one is in 3D and you have to utilise boost and quick step to take him out, and he's actually got some difficulty to him, especially when you fight him a second time in Asteroid Coaster, but it still doesn't excuse the fact that the fucker is used twice. Now the bosses aren't great, but they're not atrocious, and I do think that the pirate ship and spaceship bosses are fun to fight at their core. Not the
Big boy
though. Fuck that guy. However, the levels for Sonic Colors are a different story. Okay, so there's a huge stigma around the levels of Sonic Colors, and today I'm going to attempt to disprove it with math. So I'm only talking about the 6 areas in Sonic Colors. I'm not counting the final area you unlock. I'll talk about that later in the video, but the 6 main areas. Okay, so each area has 6 acts, so 6 times 6 equals 36. So there's 36 main levels in Sonic Colors. I've gone through every single level in Sonic Colors again and categorized them into a table. There are 3 categories: good 3D/2D, which is for levels that have a mix of both 3D and 2D sections in them; good 2D, which is for levels that are mostly 2D but still well designed and fun levels to play through; and then lastly 2D filler, which is for levels that are not fun to play with crappy 2D level design and often the use of a stage gimmick to pad out the level. So after playing through each stage in Sonic Colors again, this is what I came up with. Now do bear in mind that this is all just my opinion, and each of the stages within the categories will vary in quality against each other, since I have generalised and grouped them together, but this is where I would put all of Sonic Colors' stages. So from this we can work out some facts about the game. We can see that of all the stages in Sonic Colors, 47.2% are just 2D levels, meaning that the majority of the game is stages with a mix of 2D and 3D. We can see that of the 17 stages in the game that are pretty much just 2D, only 29.4% are filler levels, and lastly overall when looking at all the stages in the game, only 13.8% are what I would class as filler stages. So from that alone, the idea that Sonic Colors is primarily 2D is disproven, and on top of that, the idea that the majority of the levels are 2D filler is disproven as well, since only 13.8% are filler stages in my mind. Now remember as well, I have generalized here with the categories, so for all of the stages in the 2D filler section, that doesn't mean all of these stages are awful. Some are fine. I don't think there's any stage in this game that is just completely insulting and downright horrible to play. These filler stages aren't great, but they are short, and as I've shown, there really isn't many of them. When talking about the general level design in Colors, it has been changed modestly from Unleashed, but it hasn't strove so far away that it isn't recognisable. You can still tell Colors is following from Unleashed. The stages that do utilise 3D sections always flow well and work with unlimited controls. The drift sections are larger and more open, giving you more breathing room, and the quick step sections are still fast and work just like they did in Unleashed. The overall stage design in Colors is great. Most stages have different paths to take and shortcuts to find to increase replayability and allow you to speedrun the levels. And as for the just 2D levels, while I used to share that opinion that they were just boring and not fun to play, upon playing them again I have completely changed my mind. The levels are always designed in an interesting and natural way, having Sonic still keeping his speed, but also introducing new platform challenges to face throughout the game to stay fresh. I haven't even talked about the Wisps. People are pretty sick of the Wisp by now, since they were shoehorned into Sonic Lost Worlds and Forces for no real reason, but in Colors this is the one game where they're actually implemented well and have a reason to be here, since they are intricately linked into the story. The Wisps can sometimes slow the pace down, but they add variety to the gameplay. Besides, in Colors, the Wisps, while being integral to the plot, in terms of gameplay, there are not many levels where you have to use the Wisps. Many can be completed without. In the occasions where you do need to use them, they never seem to break up the pace of the game too much, and I never found myself being frustrated with the brief gimmick they give Sonic, since the level design is made to accommodate to it. Another thing with Sonic Colors is just how good the game looks for the Wii. Obviously this game was never going to look as good as Sonic Unleashed, but it is commendable just how close they get. The character models especially look very detailed and extremely similar to their Unleashed counterparts. All of the environments, while not as detailed as Unleashed, are still very lush, vibrant and colourful, and that's another thing to give Sonic Colors. creativity. When you look at a recent game like Sonic Forces, so many of the levels are using existing themes, but in colours, each area of the game is brand new and brimming with creativity and new ideas. Places like Starlight Carnival, Tropical Resort, and Planet Wisp all just have amazing theming and are a joy to blast through. This fun and creative energy also carries on into the soundtrack of Sonic Colors, which knocks it out of the park. Each of the level themes are brimming with life and energy. While they lack the drama that the Unleashed OST boasted, the pure exciting and new energy the tracks give off is spectacular, whether that be Tropical Resort's upbeat pop melodies with light guitar riffs to emphasize the happiness and excitement of a bustling resort designed to entice the public. To the more mysterious and dreamlike Planet Wisp theme to emphasize the mystery and beauty of this new planet that no one is meant to see yet, with the piano showcasing the beauty of the nature on the planet, while the sporadic guitar emphasizing the machinery Eggman has on the planet and how it's thoughtlessly tiring through the planet's terrain and corporatizing nature. Throughout the Wii's lifespan, Sonic Team really did always knock it out of the park when using the PhysX engine. Secret Rings and Black Knight are also very good looking games for the Wii, but the vast array of diverse and colourful environments Colors boasts really makes the game stand out. The game is pure eye candy, and it's incredible how good this game looks for something made for hardware that's less powerful than the original Xbox. As much as some people would like to tell you Colors is the beginning of the era where Sonic games lack creativity, for me it's clear this game is brimming with life and passion, from the lush graphics to the energetic soundtrack. Also, if you can, do yourself a favour and play this game on Wii U in HD like I did. It really gives the graphics that extra edge to make them look just as good as they possibly can.
Well, a hedgehog's gotta do what a hedgehog's gotta do.
Now I'm going to talk about the ending of this game, so if you haven't played Colors and want to experience the final boss blind, you can skip to this time in the video to avoid spoilers. The ending for Sonic Colors deserves way more credit than it gets in my opinion. So after shutting off the last generator in Asteroid Coaster, you head back to Tropical Resort and start parting with the Wisp because you have set them free. Eggman, who seems to be unfazed by you freeing the planet, states that his mind control cannon has already harnessed enough alien energy to be used on the planet, so he proceeds to fire the cannon at Earth. However, there is something that he didn't account for. Way earlier in the game, after you complete the Big Boy in Tropical Resort, you're greeted to this cutscene, and it foreshadows what is about to happen when Eggman fires the cannon.
The boss man said to wrangle every piece of this mess. When you consider what we're doing from a robot's point of view, it's actually pretty gruesome.
Don't think about it.
If you say so.
I'm missing an arm. Have you got an arm?
No, But really, how much can it matter?
I guess it can't matter much.
Upon attempting to fire the cannon, the arm that was blown into it from a fight way earlier in the game causes the whole cannon to malfunction and blow up, resulting in Tropical Resort being set on fire. I always think that this never gets enough credit, because even though it's such a simplistic use of it, it's still foreshadowing the ending of the game right at the beginning, and gives what Sonic has done a huge sense of importance. It makes the plot of Sonic Colors feel real and unpredictable. There is a huge knock-on effect from you simply smashing a robot to pieces like you always do. We are then treated to this shocking image of the happy, vibrant Tropical Resort burning to the ground. From there, Sonic and Tails have to escape and get back to Earth. In this final area of the game, you and Tails race down the space elevator so you can get in and get back to Earth. These levels are super tense and really give the player a rush as they run as fast as they can to the elevator. The accompanying music is kick-ass as well. As they approach the elevator, Eggman comes out of nowhere and delivers a fucking sick burn.
Leaving so soon! There are no lines, and I've saved the best rides for last! At least let me stab your hand so you can come back in!
And what happens now is something I see people criticize quite often, but again, I really don't see the problem. Tails says to Sonic he admits that he doesn't think they can beat this robot and he's scared, which is a valid point, since Sonic and Tails are already narrowly trying to avoid the huge blast from the malfunctioning cannon, and fighting Eggman's new robot that utilizes all of the wisps on top of it will cut things extremely close. Sonic sees this and pushes him in the elevator and sends him down to Earth. People love to say this is out of character for both Sonic and Tails, but I completely disagree. Throughout the games, Tails has always helped Sonic and told him how to attack his enemies, and then here he admits to Sonic essentially he doesn't know what to do, and Sonic pushing him in the elevator shows his care for his friend. Tails is super smart and always right, so for him to tell Sonic he doesn't know if this robot can be beaten, Sonic takes that seriously and can see the battle ahead will be tough, so he sends Tails down, so if he doesn't make it, at least Tails gets home safely. Sonic is prepared to sacrifice himself for Tails if it comes to it. While many people hate he did this, personally I thought it was great. It shows the selfless side to Sonic and even slightly connotes Sonic fears the enemy as well, at least enough to get Tails away from him. From this we get an admittedly quite easy battle with this robot, but a fun one at that, and just like Unleashed there is some serious spectacle involved. Firstly, there is an epic version of Reach for the Stars playing just like there was for Endless Possibilities in Unleashed. Eggman uses all of the different wisps you have used to aid you in the game against you for some creative attacks that, while easy, add a lot of variety to the boss fights as each wisp attack needs to be dodged differently. Sonic is still running down the tower to Earth while fighting Eggman's machine, and while he never goes supersonic, Colors does have its own little moment with all of the wisps coming together to help Sonic defeat Eggman.
Unlimited colors! Laser! Drill! Space! Rocket! You! Power! Frenzy!
Now after this boss fight, the game could have easily been over. They could have played a cutscene of Sonic running down to Earth and then the credits play, but instead we are treated to this cutscene.
This might not end well.
follows is a truly tense and very short level where you continue to race down the tower to Earth as it's falling apart all around you. No matter how fast you go through this stage, the same thing will always happen. The camera will turn behind Sonic and the blast will consume him. He can't outrun the explosion and is going to die. Just as he is about to be consumed by the blast, all of the wisps form together and save Sonic, bringing him back to Earth. This is the biggest part of the game that doesn't get enough credit. The wisps save Sonic, and that last level that Sonic literally can't complete, it's fucking perfect. Sonic Team didn't have to do that. They could have portrayed that through a cutscene, but by choosing to have the player control as Sonic, it makes that threat feel so much more real and like you are really there. You can feel the pure tension and dread as the tower falls apart while the blast gets closer and closer to Sonic. While not as grand as a game like Sonic Unleashed, for the light-hearted tone of the story and the fact that the story takes a backseat in this game, as a whole the ending is surprisingly deep, emotional and extremely atmospheric.
He said, "Thank you for saving us."
You're welcome. Thank you for saving us.
Overall, it shocks me that people seem to think Sonic Colors is not a good game anymore. I hear so many people say the same complaints about this game, and to anyone who thinks this, all I urge you to do is to play the game again, preferably with a GameCube or Classic controller. Give the game a fresh perspective and then draw your conclusions. Many people say now Sonic Colors was the start of this new meta era where the games are overly simple and lack any depth or emotion. But Sonic Colors has exceptional gameplay, creative environments, amazing graphics, a great soundtrack, and a light-hearted but still interesting story that matches with the game. While it is nowhere near as big and moving as a game like Sonic Unleashed, with Sonic Colors I still get that sense of passion from Sonic Team that I got from Unleashed. So, if you haven't played it in a while, play through the game again, and if you haven't played this at all, definitely try it out for yourself, because Sonic Colors was definitely better than I remembered.